Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Buffalo Bills Center of the West. My name is Eric Rossborough. I am Associate Librarian and Senior Cataloger here at the McCracken Research Library. I'm really proud to be here today with my cohorts, Mac Frost and Bob Richard. As usual, a lot of people put in a lot of work to make this happen. I'd like to thank Eric Simpson up in the booth and his colleagues, Jeff Dunham and John Gallagher, for working on the IT. We've got Jeff Schrin filming it. We've got Emma Goralski and Cassandra Day up at the front door, Susan Fletcher as well. We'd all like to thank you very much. The next talk was going to be on Thursday, July 18th. And the topic is TBA, to be announced. We would originally plan to have Al and Pete Simpson here today, but their presentation wasn't quite ready, so we went with something that's just about as good. Bob Richard talking about Yellowstone Bears. And with that, anything else to cover? Yeah, wait, right here. And don't forget, Bob will be signing books in the store, in front of the store after, so you've got to come up and get a signed book. One book that will not be available because it's just come out is called The Spirit of Yellowstone Bears by Bob Richard. I have an advanced copy in my hot little hands out here. It will be out next week. And with that, I give you Mac and Bob.
Thank you for coming and being a part of this. I look forward to seeing you and sharing with you, as we always do, and your input back to me is always helpful. And we'll have time for questions today. Let's get on to a project I've been working on for over a year and a half, and it's called The Spirit of Yellowstone Bears. And I struggled with it. I got a lot of help from two different bear biologists with the Game and Fish, got help from Yellowstone National Park and Xanterra. And I hope you enjoy the presentation because it's just about bears in and around Yellowstone and my favorite photographs. We'll get started. This is the front cover called Bears. And
that's appropriate.
You know, one other thing I forgot to add is one of my cousins is here today, Chan, and he is celebrating his 75th birthday. And
Older but no wiser.
anyway, I've had lots of help in putting the book together in the McCracken Library, Mac, Dad's photographs, Ned Frost photographs. Karen Lovejoy gave us some really good photographs, which are in the book. But next, I dedicated the book to Lon Garrison. He was superintendent of the park that hired me. And designated me as the front country horse ranger. And every 2 weeks he would come and say, Bob, we're going to ride this time at Old Faithful, or we're going to go to Canyon or Mammoth. And he says, of course, I'm going to ride your horse. So he rode Big Red, the last Morgan stallion in the park. And he had a great deal of influence of stopping and ending the begging bears in the park. Mission 66 he helped put together, and he also was responsible for putting in the bear-proof garbage cans. During his tenure, we used to have garbage scattered everywhere, and he took it from the post office and designed, or had it designed, so the bears couldn't get in and get the garbage spread all over. Anyway, I dedicated the book to him and his memory. Next. This is a 2-year-old bear on the way going up Sylvan Pass, and his mother had said, I'm through with you, you're on your own. And He was sitting on the hillside. I might add, all my photography was taken from the window of my vehicle. I did tours with guests for 37 years, still train guides that are guiding in Yellowstone. And I always say, stay in the car, you don't disturb the animals, and it's a whole lot safer. So all my photographs, I have a zoom on my camera, and I used to carry the Nikons and the big lenses, and it was too much trouble. And I went to a little small Canon, and I still get good photographs, and a lot of them are taken with that. Next. Well, we got it. Go back one. I call this the king of the road. This was taken on Sylvan Pass, and he was there for an hour. I had guests with me, and I was backing up as he was walking towards us, and one of my guests said, well, let him jump on the car. I said, you got to be kidding. And about that time, a pickup came the other way and stopped next to him, and I'm still backing up, and the bear jumped in the back of the pickup. Well, he got excited and started down the road. The bear jumped out, came walking back up and stood up on the snow. But he was very happy to be photographed, and this was my favorite photograph. Next. This is I call this a silver-tip grizzly, and there's a series here. Look at his claws, and his front claws are as big as your fingers. But he was walking down the river just above Pahaska. And let's next, we'll go through I guess that's all right.
Yeah, they come along a little bit later.
Mac and I finished putting this together yesterday. A caution, the Forest Service has put this up in the Wapata Valley, but I can't say enough about being safe in viewing any wildlife, not just bears. And we have far more grizzlies today, and far more bears, but not as many black bears. I've asked the Park Service in Yellowstone, well, how many black bears do you have? Well, they said, we don't have money for a study for that. We don't know how many black bears are here. I said, it would be nice. Of course, if you didn't put collars on them, they would be a much happier bear too. And they didn't like my comments. But, anyway, this is Uncle Ned's photograph taken back in the early days. Mac, comment on this.
Well, Ned was quite a photographer. This is one of his still photographs, but that's also his old Akeley newsreel camera, which he used to photograph wildlife. He was one of the very earliest wildlife cinematographers. And there's a great story about Ned going up with his middle son, Richard, or Dick as we called him, and got up on this ridge line, and up came this magnificent elk and stood on the edge of the ridge. Ned got his camera all set up and got everything all put together and ready to go. And the elk just stood there and posed for him, and he's grinding on the handrail or the hand crank right here. That's the drive for when you're away from electricity and whatnot. And he was going to beat the band, and then the elk turned and went down over the ridge and was gone. And Ned was jumping up and down, and oh boy, that's the best footage I ever got in my life. And he walked around to the front of the camera and had forgotten to take the lens cap off. And Dick said that he swore straight for 5 minutes and never repeated himself once.
Next. This is the same bear, and you'll see a cub down below, but he got a series of them. Next. She had 2 cubs, and I kind of think they're great shots to have in the book. Next. There's the 2 cubs. I'm sure that
Movie stars in the making.
There you go. Next.
Whoops.
This is one of my dad's photographs. We used to go to the park as a youngster, and we had the begging black bears along all the highways. Not too many problems, but from the time the roads were plowed, they were out there looking for handouts. Next. This is Ned's camera truck with two cubs trying to get fed through the window.
Ned was the proprietor of the Studebaker Garage here in Cody, and sold Studebakers to all sorts of folks. And this is long before they came up with the idea of a camper or a motorhome, and so he built one of his own. And in it he had a little potbelly stove to keep the place warm. He also had a small dark room in there where he could develop his film and even make prints. So he traveled around with a number of different cameras all the time, but he had this unit to go wherever he wanted to.
Next. This is one of my favorite photographs. Photograph Jones with the Frost and Richard Cook wagon, and photograph is feeding the bear out the window. This was a common practice for a lot of years in Yellowstone, and you'll see this in a couple of my books, and it's going to be in this book. Next. This is a Jack Richard photograph, and trying to pick out just a few of Dad's photographs of begging bears in the 50s. Next. And then this is a Ned Frost photograph, and look at the size of the paws, and that bear has finished off the pie, and I'm sure he wanted more. Next. This is one of my grandmother's brother-in-laws, Dick Voltmer, and he only had one arm, but he was very busy feeding the bears. But he did not lose his arm to a bear, Chan, I promise you. Next. This is one of our horse wranglers, Shorty Kelly, and he was a horse whisperer and managed the horses for Frost and Richard for a lot of years. Next. Here is a couple feeding a big sow, and typical of scenes in the 20s when they had cars in the park. This is a YMCA group. There were two-year-old cubs and the kids with their box cameras, and it was just a common thing. Very few people ever got hurt. Once in a while somebody would either be bit or slapped by a bear, and they were mostly black bear. Next. Here's a woman out of her car, and the bear standing on all his hind legs and saying, "Feed me." But this was common all the way through the 50s. And then Ned got this series, not very clear, but you can see that bear says, "Feed me." Next.
What's for dinner, Mom?
Give me some grits.
Anyway, a good series. Next. And this is taken at Roosevelt Lodge. Look carefully in the lower left-hand corner, and what's sitting there but their bear that ate with them. You see it? Xanterra shared that. That's a Yellowstone Park photograph. But that was common. Next. Here's a sow with two cubs, and this was taken in the 50s.
This was taken at Isa Lake, I should say.
There you go. Next. This was common.
Yep. You got something for me? They knew all the tricks how to get peanut butter and jelly sandwiches out of the tourists. They just act a little fun, and they'll give you something. Or you could take it from them.
While I was there, I did road patrol, horse patrol, boat patrol, but people were always feeding the bears. And one day I was headed out towards the Hayden Valley, and here's a couple parked, and they're out of their car, and they're trying to put their baby on the back of the mother bear. And I very carefully got out of the truck, went over and picked the 3-year-old child off the back of the bear, and they were trying, of course, to take the picture. Walked back to the pickup, put the child in my patrol pickup, and then I said, I'm writing you a ticket. Well, why would you do that? I said, you endangered and probably could have lost your child. And I said, you will go to the judge. And they were quite angry and upset. I call that the Disney syndrome, and we still have that in the park today, that people forget that they're wild animals. This is one that I took up by Tower Junction from the car, and that is my favorite black bear photograph. Next. This is a 2-year-old with its mother. Next. This is the mother. She was walking towards the car. This was taken just a couple of years ago. This is a young 2-year-old black bear, and just looking for seeds, bugs. Next. And take a close look at this cinnamon bear, which is a black bear, and look in his mouth. He's eating a dandelion. One of my favorites. Another black bear photograph. Next. How about that? Do you think he's had enough to eat? Really big and fat. Next. Another. The bear do quite well in Yellowstone, and especially when they were being fed along the road. In fact, I had a wife that would leave after I went to work in the pickup, and she would buy sacks of grapefruit and oranges and would go out and find and feed the bear. She says they would peel the orange or the grapefruit and eat it, and all that juice would run down their cheeks, and she says, I loved it. And my boss caught her one day and chewed on her and said, you can't do that. And she says, well, when your wife quits picking flowers in the park to put on the table, I'll quit feeding the bears. And of course, I heard all about it when he got back to the office. But I never did break her of feeding the bears. Next. In August on the North Fork and elsewhere, the bears come in and eat the chokecherries. And there's a series here of a mama bear and her cub, and they won't move when they get into the chokecherries and they're ripe. They just eat them and eat them and eat them. And a good time for photography. And then I have people that tell me about how they were on the other side of the bush trying to pick them for take home and watching the bear on the other side. And I could get into that story, but I'll pass today. Anyway, chokecherries and other types of bugs and what have you are part of the diet of these bears. Here's the mother and her cub, and they won't move out of the patch. And today, when you see in August, I call it a bear jam on the North Fork, they're down eating, and people get way too close. Now this one is eating clover, and I'm sure hasn't missed a meal in days.
Walking all over this field of clover, sort of cherry picking as it were, getting the big blossoms. and gaining a few extra pounds. That's a lot of clover.
And that's a lot of bear, don't it?
That's a lot of bear.
And you know, growing up in this country, oh, look at there. I found this on a limb when I had a busload of people, and they said, "What's that?" I says, "What, you've never seen a teddy bear?" And in the book, it explains how the teddy bear came about. And somebody had captured a black bear and told Teddy Roosevelt that he could go shoot it. And he says, "I'm not going to shoot a bear that's on a rope." And somebody developed a teddy bear and named it after Teddy Roosevelt. Now we're going to grizzly bears in a series of grizzly photographs. And you can always find them anywhere in the park today. The black bears are very few, and the grizzlies run them out of their ranges, but the next series is on grizzlies, and they're eating the flowers, they're eating grass,
They eat insects.
and moths. They go up against the rocks and roll rocks and eat moths in August. Some of them are light colored, some are dark. Look at their big long noses and the hump on their back. He's got some mud around his face. He's been digging in the ground. And these are taken from the car, but they're always up there. I went up a week ago, and they're usually around Mary Bay in the Hayden Valley, but they're scattered all over the park. Lots and lots of grizzlies, a lot more than when I was growing up.
Here's your series of pictures of that.
The silver tip on the North Fork. We'll just go through them slowly.
Walking along the side of the riverbank, right towards you. Click. Click.
He has this down. But anyway, fun series of bear. And we have bear that I was told yesterday or the day before was up at the Buffalo Bill Reservoir walking on the sand. So they're everywhere.
Yeah, I've seen a video on Facebook of that bear walking along the edge of the Buffalo Bill Reservoir.
This is one of Karen Lovejoy's photographs of a sow grizzly. And next. Oh, I thought we had some more. She has quite a series with a boar and a sow that's in the book, and I couldn't recover them on my computer. For some reason, when we had to change venues, my computer went dead for 4 days. But Mac and I put together what we could. The memory of this is at Steamboat Point, and I had 4 guests in my car photographing it, and of course the car stacked up behind me, and a group of Orientals jumped out of their car, 5 or 6, ran right in front of me, right up to the bear, and started photographing it. And they said, "Well, are you going to warn them?" I said, "No, we're leaving. I don't want to see what might happen." And I just drove away. Apparently they didn't get hurt, but the bears are pretty patient. But when they get within
but their
10 or-
patience only goes so far.
Anyway, I always say stay in your car and be safe. This is one of Karen's photographs with the young small female and the boar, and they were about to mate. This bear had a cub, and she was up on Middle Fork of the Shoshone, and her cub fell off the log and went downstream screaming, and she looked over where I was stopped, and she knew that we had her cub, and she was jumped into the river and was headed towards us. And as she got to the shore, she heard her baby downstream and turned around and went back downstream. So it wasn't as critical as I thought it might be. I was ready to drive off, but this is the same sow with her cub behind her coming down the hill. Next. This is another season several years later when she had 2 cubs, and this is up by the East Gate. And she loved to be photographed with her cubs. And
This is Bear 109. And she was a kind of a fixture up there on the Middle Fork of the Shoshone, which runs right in front of Pahaska, and then right down there by the bridge is where it dumps into the North Fork. It's the Middle Fork of the North Fork of the Shoshone River. And when she first showed up there, she almost always had cubs, and she was fairly tolerant of the tourists until they got too close, and then she chased them away. Well, one of the people that got chased away complained about it to the Park Service, so they trapped Bear 109 and her cub and moved them clear over to the southwest corner of the park on the Pitchstone Plateau. And within a week, she was back at Pahaska. And the Park Service said, well, this is her territory, she's claimed it. And after that, anybody who complained that this bear charged them got fined for being too close to the bear, because they knew that the bear was not going to do anything until you got too close.
related to that same bear, I came down with guests one day, and John Lonsbury, the district ranger from Lake, was at Pahaska, and they had one of the forest rangers from Wapita up there, and 109 was in the middle of the parking lot, and people were all the way around her. And they were trying to get the people away and make a passage so that they could leave. And it was critical. Nobody got hurt, but people don't think. Here's another shot of one of her cubs. Next. This is taken in the Hayden Valley, and when you see bear, I like to hike where I can see distances, but if the bear is there and they hear you, they'll stand up on their hind legs and look, and they listen and they smell. And I took a physician, his wife, three little girls, the youngest was 7, and we hiked out to Storm Point near Indian Pond. And coming back through the trees, I was looking down the trail, and here comes a grizzly like this coming at us, and I got us off the trail and got us probably 100 yards off, and I said, just be still, don't move. And they all had their hands on me, holding on to me, and I'm going, I don't need this. And the bear stopped and stood up like this, looked around. We didn't move. She went back down on her 4 legs and walked on past us. And we waited a few minutes and then walked back out on the trail. And the little girl grabbed me and she says, I was shaking so bad I didn't know what to do except hang on to you. And I thought, baby, so was I shaking. But I didn't tell her that. Anyway, here are 2 cubs that I watched being weaned. The mother had just left to go off with the boar, and they cried and they screamed and they looked for her. And they'd been with her for 2 years. And go back one. I call that set hike. But this was up there by Sleeping Giant. And they were beside themselves. They'd lost their mother, they knew it, and they survived. But anyway, got a couple of good shots. It was spitting some snow. And they just cried like babies. Next. This is 109 again, up by the East Gate. Okay. This is out at Steamboat Point, and that boar was there almost all of one summer. And when John Lonsbury, the district ranger, retired about 10 years ago, I had some Hawaiian friends from Hawaii that were staying with me, and we went up and brought a horse trailer, and we helped John move from Lake, where his residence was, all the way up to Ennis. And as we were loading the trailer, John's going around saying, "Hey, I'm in no hurry to leave here." And his wife Lois, who ran all the hospitals in the park, said, "Bob, get these horse trailers loaded and get him out of here." And we had a couple of bear walk through while we were loading the trailers. And John says, "They won't bother you." And we all went in the house till they walked on through. But grizzly bears are a part of Yellowstone. They're a part of this country. And lo and behold, all of a sudden they found them all the way down by Tinsley and in the Bighorns. And they said, "That's a first." And I thought, no, they've been there a long time. They just haven't told anybody. But here's one of my favorite photographs. This is by Indian Pond. And today the Park Service works hard to have rangers out controlling the traffic, getting people off the highway, and keeping the distance between people and bear. And then next one is something I felt needed to be in here. These is part of the bear scat. And if you go up the North Fork in August, you can tell how many bears are working the chokecherries. We'll look at the next one. They're on the highway, and they're all over the highway. And I've counted as many as 18 fresh bear scat in a day going up the highway about the 15th of August. And people say, "What's that?" And so then I introduce them and say, "Who would like to become a certified scatologist?" And I always get somebody. And when I take people hiking and we find bear scat, we talk about it along with the other types of scat of animals. But I always qualify somebody as a scatologist for the group. And it's fun.
And of course, seasoned scatologists can tell what kind of bear it is by the contents of the excrement. For instance, black bear would be full of grass and chokecherries and the bones of little voles and things like that. And the scat of grizzly bears will be filled with little tiny brass bells, and it'll smell like bear spray.
That's subtle humor.
Yeah. There's also a really easy way to tell what kind of bear you encounter. Is when a bear comes up on you suddenly and everything like that, climb a tree. If the bear follows you up into the tree to eat you, it's a black bear. If the bear pushes the tree over to get at you to eat you, it's a grizzly.
Thank you, Mac. This is 109 again up the North Fork. And that's, again, the king of the road. And I wish I'd put more photographs in, but they weren't in the book. So we just stayed with that one. And 109 was hit by a car up at Pahaska, and it was mounted, and it's upstairs as you come in the museum. And so 109 has a favorite place in our history. But I think that brings us close to the end. This photograph here is a photograph that the Park Service and Xanterra buys for everyone that retires from Yellowstone. And the retirees in Yellowstone favor this and want it. And it's on an aluminum plate. And they will always have it. I'm going to make sure that that's available after I'm gone and going somewhere else. But anyway. And McCracken Library is responsible for putting the local lore on. And we have a few minutes for questions. You'll notice that I left time for questions. Some of my speakers tend to go over time, but they too are much more interesting. But are there any questions? If you could, interested, yes.
Question. So I heard years ago when we used to ride up the north, or anyway, didn't they study the black bears up by Blackwater Lodge? Didn't they used to study them up there? That's what I heard years ago.
I don't think so. The only other mic is upstairs. Just go grab that one back, Eric.
The Game and Fish does study bears, but they're so busy transporting bears from one place to another that are problems. You'll see signs where they're trying to trap bears and get them moved if they become a nuisance, hitting garbage areas at the different lodges. I guess my comment is I'm sure somebody was studying them. Those that study the grizzlies in the park have colleges that help pay for their coming out and studying the animals. The Craigheads were in Yellowstone when I was a ranger, and they did major studies on the grizzly bears. In those days, we knew we had 60 grizzlies in the Hayden Valley. And instead of having TV, which we didn't have in the park, we would drive in the patrol car out to the bear dump in the Hayden Valley. At 4 o'clock, we would have a picnic dinner, and then the Craigheads would be in bear traps inside them because they had spotlights, and they stayed all night watching the bears trail in from all 4 directions, coming into Trot Creek, where the dump was. And they would come in with their cubs, and the boars would come in, and that was our entertainment. And we used our spotlights and watched them. And we had one called Scarface, and the other one we called Ingomar, 2 big boars. And they would stand on their hind legs and slap each other. And we'd watch that, and then the mama bears with their cubs would be digging in the cans and trying to get garbage. And all of a sudden, if the cub got into something the mother wanted, whop, and she'd send him rolling 10, 15 feet. But that was our entertainment. And during the day, when I had to trap a grizzly in a campground, that type of thing, I'd go by and get rancid bacon from the cafeteria and some honey, and I'd set the trap up in the campground, and once I trapped the bear, then I'd haul it out to the bear dump in the Hayden Valley. Craigheads were there with a crew of 10 people because they were studying them, and they would dart the bear in the trap, pull him out. His eyes are wide open, and they would stretch him out on his chest. And some of them were doing plaster of Paris casts of the feet, of the mouth, measuring everything. And they said, "Don't you want to help, Bob?" I says, "You got to be kidding. I'm sitting in the truck with a 270, and this old bear's there with his eyes wide open. He doesn't move." And one day I was watching him do this, and he went woof and flopped his feet. And all these guys rolled off, and out came their 357 pistols pointing at the poor old bear. And but he was still anesthetized, and he got back to work. And I thought, you couldn't pay me enough money to do that kind of business studying bears. But and then in the 70s, they moved the Craigheads out. The superintendent didn't like the way they were doing the study, which the Craigheads had suggested that they slowly stop feeding the bears, and the Park Service shut it off, and the bears went right to the campgrounds. And they had to kill a lot of grizzly bears in the campgrounds because they were threatening people. But lots of lessons to be learned, and my memories of the park and the bears were doing away with the black bears in the 60s as I left, and I went off to the Marine Corps to fly airplanes. But coming back, I missed the begging black bears. That was part of Yellowstone for me growing up. And the studies continue, and I get upset as a visitor in Yellowstone when I see collars not just on bears or wolves, but coyotes and elk and other animals. To me, they should be free in the park and not be collared or trapped, and they should have the same freedom that you and I have in the park, but I'm a minority. But anyway, good question about studies. What's your next question? I'll repeat it.
Is it true that they take a lot of the bears and dump them into Mormon Creek, the bad bears?
You'd have to, the question is it true that they dump a lot of bears in Mormon Creek? Who knows? The game and fish, depending on where they trap them, move them, and they try to move them where there aren't a lot of people. There are probably 8 to 10 cabins on Mormon Creek. I don't think they would drop a bear there. They would try to find a place less populated. The bears are moved all over the forest, and the forest and the game and fish coordinate that. And I really haven't taken a real interest in where they put them, but it's difficult when they're eating cattle on the TE ranch and they trap them, where they're going to move them. My attitude is, let's move them to Jackson, not here. But that's just a personal opinion. Did I answer your question? Anyone else?
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Do the black bears and grizzlies, do they interbreed? That's the
Black-
question.
Do black bears and grizzlies interbreed?
No, they're separate species. The grizzly bear is connected with the brown bear of Alaska, and that's one species. The grizzly bears will kill and eat a black bear. If a black bear comes into their area, they'll either run them out or kill them. Today, I think there's probably between 1,200 and 1,500 grizzlies in the Yellowstone ecosystem, which includes Shoshone National Forest. And one of the things that we have Yellowstone that has 2.3 million acres of land, and our Shoshone Forest in the lower 48 is the largest forest and the oldest, and it has about 2.2 million acres. So our forest and the park have to work closely together, but the bears have their maybe miles wide by 10 or 15 miles long, and they are very territorial. And I find black bears up by Tower Falls. There's a sow that has cubs every 3 years or so going up to Sylvan Pass. And I always tell my guests when we see the sow and her cubs, I said, they're being entertained this summer. They're watching the tourists go by. And I say that of the buffalo and whatever. But those are two places that I usually find black bear, but they're scarce in most of the park.
Is it common for them to have twins, or black bears?
Is it common for them to have twins?
And about the hibernation time frame, do they hibernate?
They do hibernate, both black and grizzlies. This year, the grizzlies were seen in the park almost every month. They will come out of hibernation. There wasn't much snow in Yellowstone this year. They usually have a single cub on either species the first or second time, but they do have twins, and sometimes they have triplets. We have a couple of times found bears with 4 cubs. One 399 over in Jackson had 4 cubs and took them through 2 years before she weaned them. In fact, I think she had them through the 3rd year before she weaned them. Did that answer your question?
Pretty much, and I just got one more with the, how long are you gonna be at the bookstore for the signing?
Well, I'll probably finish there and go right up there, and I'll be there till nobody's there.
So you're not there till the end of the day, right?
No, but we will get the bear book. This book was due yesterday and it didn't get here, and probably won't be here till next week. But you can contact us and get one if you're not here in Cody. Yes?
One last thing with do the coyotes bother the bears at all? Or do you hear about the population and they want to increase the population of the coyotes for where?
The coyotes and the wolves take second place to the bears. If you go up in the Lamar especially, the wolves will take down an elk, and then the grizzly bear, if she's hungry, will come and lay on top of the carcass and say, mine. And then either the wolves or the coyotes, and the wolves will kill the coyotes if they can, but they will circle and stay at a distance along with the eagles and the ravens. And one thing you always need to be careful, anytime you see ravens and birds on a carcass, don't go near it, because the bear, if he has been there and has eaten, he's going to go get in the shade during the day and watch his carcass. And many people that are in the backcountry hiking or on horseback want to see what's there, and then the bear charges them, and then they wonder why. So always avoid dead carrion and avoid where the birds are, because there's a bear lurking, protecting it, and you don't want to get charged. Did I answer your question?
Any other questions for Bob? All right, thank you very much. We'll see you upstairs. Hope to see you in July.